Mhm.
Okay, so we're sitting here today with Brian Hoover. It's December 7th, and I'd like to say thank you for coming. Wonderful to meet you. And I'd love to begin by asking you to please take a few minutes, Brian, and tell us a little bit about yourself. How long you've been on Bowen, what your interest is here, what your work is in terms of the arts, and we'd love to hear a little bit about what makes you happy here.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I guess I'd start by saying that coming to Bowen was leaving the big city and coming to a smaller community where there's lots of nature. So that was what the attractor was. As far as my practices go, my trade is in violin making, which includes violas, cellos, and basses, and that is a trade of making and repairing instruments. So it's very transferable. I had a shop in Vancouver, um, and it works to have a shop here on Bowen. I still do lots of work for Vancouverites and larger um, area as well. But it's a trade that you can do in a small space. So I just have a shop in the home. I don't need a storefront or anything like that. So it's very transferable. So it worked to come here. The actual trade itself is at the more artistic level, uh, providing people with instruments, either making them or repairing what they have. Um, the aspect of that, which is artistic, is that I'm in the role of uh, giving people their voice and how to express themselves. Not everybody speaks as their primary expression. Not everybody sings. A lot of people play instruments, and the reason they do is because that's what expresses their, joy and sadness really well. So I get to be in the role of helping them with that expression. So it's a great honor to
Very
be in
nice.
that role. So it's not of course it's very um, hands on. It's wood and things like that, but I have a gift with that, so it works really well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's part of my trade. And here on Bowen, um, it's a very small community, so of course there are some violinists, and I help them with that. Um, I think more, let's see, in terms of reaching more people on Bowen, the various singing practices that we've developed over the last, say, 10 years, and community building music practices. Singing and community building music practices represent the wider um, outreach of why, I guess not so much why, but how it is that I contribute here on the island. How I'm in service is a good way to put
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So, just to back up a little bit, even getting into violin making came from a place of being a professional musician, um, playing the bass, which is a wonderful instrument because it crosses over everything from symphony to jazz to dance music. You can play everything with an upright bass. So I did. And at the same time, it's performing art.
Mm-hmm.
And I left that I left it because it was a very high pressure environment,
Mm-hmm.
especially playing in the symphony. Perfection was a daily
Mm-hmm.
demand, and I found that to be personally very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And also looking around, I looked at the wider community and also confirmed my suspicion that perfection was not maybe the best, you know, tail to be chasing kind of thing. So I left that environment and just kind of went obliquely into the, care and feeding of instruments. So I'm still directly connected with that world, but I'm more in service of, like I said, helping people find their voice.
Mm-hmm.
From that aspect of realizing the pitfalls of perfection and performance arose out of that by moving here, arose out of that. First of all, it was the community drum circle
Mm-hmm.
that arose around that time. Arthur Hall kind of created this thing, which is a North American phenomenon. It doesn't exist anywhere else. That is called a drum circle, and it's the idea is that anybody can come and participate. They need no previous musical training. In drum practices around the world, you study for decades before you even, play in public.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in North America, there's a need for people to come together musically. And the need is to create community, a rhythmic community in the case of drumming. And that need is met without training.
Right.
So it flies in the face of the model of perfection. So, of course, it's not for perfectionists.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, so that arose and it appealed to me. With one thing and another, Shasta and I found ourselves drawn to that because it was an antidote to our previous symphony experience.
Right. And so you're working as a violin maker.
Yep.
And you also have the opportunity at times to play the bass.
Yep.
And drum.
Yep.
And is there anything else that you're artistically involved in as a performer or?
Not so much performer, but singing is the next one.
Singing.
And that arose from this drumming model of anybody can drum, or at least anybody can contribute rhythmically in a group setting, which is different than mastery of a drum. There's no confusion about that. I'm not, I'm anything but a master drummer, and yet I can create a direct connection with somebody, even if it's just you and me,
Mm-hmm.
with the use of simple musical instruments,
Mm-hmm.
ones that don't require, at least 10, 20 years to master, like the
Mm-hmm.
violin, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not anybody you can't just pick up the violin
Mm-hmm.
and play jigs and reels,
No.
or Beethoven's, violin concerto.
No,
But you can pick up a simple tambourine and drum. Yeah. So from that, at the same time, and these things arise in the world, these awarenesses, from Arthur Hall seeing the need for people to come together and using percussion to do it, at the same time there's this upswelling of people realizing that we could come together and sing in the same way.
Very nice.
And that it's not a performance.
Mm-hmm.
The person I can think of most directly responsible is Siobhan Robinson in Victoria, who created, along with, like I said, it was not one person, but it was an awareness that arose. Of course it arose out of need.
Mm-hmm.
So the need is for people to connect, and that need is because there was disconnect. No lack of that these days. But she saw that, I can get people to come together. We can sing simple songs with no music, no sheet music, no performance mandate. And we have done, and what happens is people connect, and usually there's some kind of healing involved.
Yes.
I know she did a lot of work at the Hollyhock
Mm-hmm.
Retreat Center
Mm-hmm.
around working with people that were told they couldn't sing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great tragedies in our culture that's arisen in North America is that people are told as little children, as a child, that they don't have any rhythm and they can't sing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't count the number of times
Mm-hmm.
people have said that.
Mm-hmm.
When I say, "Oh, I have this drum circle," or "I have this singing group," and they say, "I can't sing. I have no rhythm."
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole aspect of this need being manifest
Yeah.
in singing. So we have
Yeah.
a singing circle, which is exactly that.
Wow.
Meets weekly.
And everybody's included.
Everybody's included.
Lovely.
People come and they get to express themselves and connect.
So, having been here that long and having watched yourself grow into, the person that you are today as a
Yes.
violin maker and as a bass player, as well as somebody who helps with Shasta to set the foundation for a space where everybody's included
Yeah.
in song. What would you say is your most memorable experience of that so far?
Well,
I mean, that's a lot, but
It's a lot, but no, there's two things that come to mind that drumming wise, like maybe not one specific time, but there were several groups, um, like little drum circle groups that participated at the Bowfest
mm-hmm,
um, event in August here on Bow, in the
mm-hmm,
community fair, and um, there were for several years in a row. We did that every August. Once we were even in the parade, and that was there was such a joy of expression in those events,
hmm.
and it was very ragtag. Um, Anybody with any kind of judgment would say eh, but that wasn't the point.
Hmm.
And people still that kind of that is our focus has shifted more to singing, but I still see people that participated in those events that say that they remember them and they remember them fondly.
Mm.
Yeah, and as far as so that's one thing I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for singing, I think let's see. I think singing for the trees.
Mm.
One time we did this, gathered a group of people and sang to this great old tree out at Xenia.
Opa.
Yeah, and it was very that event and the previous drumming one. They're like ripples that expand out and are still going.
Mm-hmm.
People still talk about them.
Hmm.
So those are two examples of that I can
That's a
remember.
far-reaching.
Yes, they go
That's
a long
very
way.
far-reaching. Yeah. Thank you. What's in your opinion, the challenges of being who you are on Bowen, of the challenges of being a violin maker or of being that kind of person who wants to include and wants people to know that the door is open?
The biggest challenge is, I believe, that people are required to work too hard. By that I mean that they need to engage with the current economic system to a level that is much more intense than it was 20 years ago when we first moved here, so that they don't that their free time, their and their what's called disposable income, as if anyway, it's what it's called. That's all compromised now, and the biggest challenge is that I believe that people are being driven too hard by a system which is very it's antithetical to community building. It's isolation. It creates isolation.
So
So the
would
challenge is to how do we offer a gathering, and the first response is I have no time. It used to be I don't have any money. But in the last 10 years, it's now I don't have the time.
Mm.
To the point now where if it's free,
Mm.
it still is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting that way.
Mm-hmm.
And heartbreaking at the same time
Mm-hmm.
to see people so burdened
With making a living.
Yep.
With just trying to keep things
just
together.
trying to keep still or in one place.
Yeah.
You know, I find it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm.
So here we are, and you've described you in your most creative way, as it is. Can you tell me a bit about what holds? Is there anything that holds you back from attending or from being more involved in the arts in other forms? You've described well your life as an artist and as a violin maker. What do you feel you would need, or is there anything that stops you from being more creative and more engaged in the arts in other ways on Bowen Island?
In other ways,
Well, there's lots of forms of art.
yes.
So it could be a question related to other arts on Bowen Island, or being more involved in other.
Yeah. Is there anything that's in my way?
Yeah.
Which
Any challenges that you face in terms of being able to be more involved in the arts, or participating or attending yourself? Because you're talking about attendance. You're
in
talking,
part, yes.
and you're talking about it from a perspective of somebody whose doors open to sharing the arts.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other side of it for you, as a participant to other forms?
Well, I think the only thing that gets in the way, or at least one thing that gets in the way of participating in theater and dance, is the lack of a place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of we have a little
Mm-hmm.
Muppet Theater at the Tiernanog, which is
Mm-hmm.
a little gym,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very Bowen-esque,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd call that a challenge. Lack of appropriate venue, and I guess the venue. I'd like to make a distinction here between performing and participating, in that there isn't a large space other than the Bowfest field,
Right.
which is fair weather permitting.
Yes.
But there isn't a large indoor space where there could be community dancing,
Right.
other than the gym, which is like in the minus category as far as ambience and healing spirit goes. Yeah, so that's a challenge. There's nowhere to do some.
It's a very good point, and it's something that Shasta brings up also about the need for a community place to participate. That it's open. It's an open space to.
I think you'll find everybody that you interview
will speak of this.
I'm sure.
Of the need for this, for a location to ground the arts a little bit more.
Centralize it. And I'm all for performance. That's fine. And a place for the community to come in, participate in, again, this kind of non-performing way as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what would you say then, if that's a bit of an obstacle, what would you say our greatest cultural asset is? What's on the other end of that?
Well, the greatest cultural asset has got to be nature. It really is. The lake, the trails, the beaches, all the trees that I think it would be very challenging to live here and not be influenced by nature and its invitation to connect. The wonderful thing about nature is that it's not demanding, and that you can go out and participate in it to the degree to which you want to,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it's always welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that nature is our biggest asset right now.
Hmm. How, in saying that, if nature is our biggest asset, how do you see it represented in the arts at this time? Where do you see it? How do you see it?
Where do I see it
Have you seen
represented?
a change in how that's represented on Bone? Because I would agree that I think this is the most beautiful place on earth.
Hmm.
I've said it many times already,
Mm-hmm.
that it offers a pristineness and a consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
One side of the island is not the same as the other side of the island. The way the sun hits one beach doesn't. It's not the same as another beach.
Yeah.
So you have this pristine beauty, and because it's so strong, and because it's an island, it's not the mainland. It has a very, very powerful impact on us.
Right.
How would you see that? As you said, it's a cultural asset. How is it impacting the arts? Is there any thought on that?
Sure. Yeah, well, the first one is that it's an endless inspiration for the painters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have all kinds of paintings in our house that are
Yeah.
local painters of local scenes.
Yeah.
And some of them are no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
There's one of a wonderful stump that used to be part of the Killarney Lake Trail. Somebody painted almost 20 years ago, and it's since deteriorated and collapsed. So
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. So obviously painters
Mm-hmm.
are just in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the singing, or let's see, music, theater, and dance. Nah, not quite sure. Well, so I can't speak to theater and dance because I'm not
Mm-hmm.
that well versed in it.
Mm-hmm.
But for music, it's an asset that I do think that we have this gathering that meets every Monday night. We sing in
Mm-hmm.
a little hall,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a hall where you gather. And I do see, though, that the asset of going out into nature
Mm-hmm.
and singing is a very different experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a wonderful song leader come up from Port Townsend, and part of our weekend with him was he said we need to go outside,
Mm-hmm.
and he was absolutely right,
Mm-hmm.
because we've been singing all weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and so that it may not in the city, it may not be so. May not be so much freedom
Yes.
to be able to go out and
That's right.
sing in a park.
That's right.
People might get a little.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know, but
And just the energetics aren't as welcoming
yeah,
necessarily because
exactly.
they're already
Yeah.
taken.
I
It's
mean, here we
already
were
yeah.
blocking the path in this little park, right, singing
Mm-hmm.
away. People
Mm-hmm.
went by and they were smiling and beaming, you know. So it was good that way.
What would you say distinguishes us or differentiates us on Bowen Island versus Vancouver?
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Versus. Yeah. Well, there's an integration of, because it's a smaller community, people know each other. Oh, I know. So I would describe it as casualness. There's a casualness which I believe is invaluable, in that it flies in the face of the exclusivity of artists.
Mm-hmm.
So that in the city, a person who is, if they're famous, they may not even want to walk down the street,
Mm-hmm.
because people will accost them and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And where we have people on Bowen that are famous,
Mm-hmm.
and you meet them in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it deflates a bit of the separation between artists and the rest of the people,
Mm-hmm.
because really we're all artists,
Mm-hmm.
and artists are people. So I don't. I see the division of that, and this goes back hundreds of years, starting to push the artists into a separate class is being very destructive.
Whereas on Bowen, it's
Yeah,
not like
it's
that.
not so much.
No.
Yeah, and I get a kick out of that.
Yeah, where the person who may have the job at the, doing this very high-paying job can also be the person who's going to show at the gallery.
Yeah.
In other words, there's no separation necessarily. That anybody can be an artist.
That's right.
Yes.
I'd say that's
Yeah.
definitely
And can partake in whatever form or whatever level they want.
Yep.
So they don't have to be exclusively within one box. They can actually expand into being a fuller engagement in community.
Yeah.
Very nice.
That's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I would say that sounds pretty good to me too. What has changed most since you've arrived on Bowen? What do you see the biggest changes today?
The biggest change has been the rise of the number of people leaving the island every day to go to work. The number of commuters. So that when we first came here, there's always classes. Classism is part of the culture we live in. There is working class and middle class and owning class.
Right.
The owning class stays the same, but the working class is diminished a lot. And the middle class that's moved here, they're all commuting. So they're not here as much. And I see that as being, it makes it more challenging to gather the community. And yet, it's what it is. But it's definitely a change since we moved here 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a particular type of artistic or cultural activity that you'd like to learn more about, or see more about on Bowen Island?
Yeah, I'd say community circle dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's old,
Basic, like
pagan practices.
or even I can understand like having a fiddler come in and just having some old country music, dancing.
Yeah, that kind
some
of thing.
community dancing.
Yeah, something that's simple. Yeah, something like that.
Very nice. In a few words, what brought you to Bowen Island? And when you look back at what you just told us, how would you reply to that now?
What brought us to Bowen?
And what would you miss most if you had to leave?
Oh, okay. Well, what brought us here? I do believe it was a bit of fleeing and seeking refuge from.
So refuge is a strong one.
From large cities. I do believe that it was the concreteness and the paving and the seats. It never stops, kind of thing. Yeah. So that was one of the things we left the city, and we're grateful that we left that behind. What do I miss? What would I miss? Or what do I miss? Well, I can't think of anything.
Oh, there you go.
I do go back to the city on a regular basis, and there are some things that may be more convenient, more access to some things, but in the long run, nope.
Okay.
I don't think so.
So do you have any other thoughts about Bowen Island and artistic or creative needs and its development?
Artistic and creative needs. Well, I guess my last thought would be, because this is a project that touches all the disciplines, and I hope what comes out of it is some way to encourage all artistic expression to be returned to the people. It's going to need a space to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also going to need an attitude shift
Mm-hmm.
where I think everybody can paint,
Mm-hmm.
everybody can
Mm-hmm.
create a skit or
Mm-hmm.
a little theater piece,
Mm-hmm.
and so I really want to narrow that gap, even if it's on this little isolated, or not isolated, but a smaller little community. If we can create a smaller gap between that, exclusive artistic icon on a pedestal and the rest of the people, then we will have really done some good work for
Mm.
the
Thank you.
human race.
Thank you. That sounds wonderful too. I think so. I think the ability to open to
Mm-hmm.
creativity as something that's a necessity,
Yep.
that's of always of value at any age, at any time, and that nobody's exclusive or excluded from, the possibility of sharing that. I would say that's always something to strive for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you for your time
Mm.
and great pleasure
Yeah.
talking to you today.
Me too.